Jake Morrison wiped the sweat from his face as he walked through the strange purple. Grass of Kepler 4 for to be. The morning sun cast long shadows between the crystal trees that grew like giant diamonds from the ground. He had been on this alien world for 3 months now, studying the plants and animals that lived here. It was his job to make sure the human mining colony would not hurt the local wildlife. The air smelled like flowers and metal, Jake carried his scanner in one hand and a sample bag in the other. He was looking for new types of plants that might be useful for medicine. Back on Earth, the company paid good money for discoveries like that. As he walked deeper into the crystal forest, Jake heard something that made him stop. It was a soft crying sound, like a kitten, but deeper. The sound came again, weak and full of pain. Jake followed the noise, pushing aside the low crystal branches that tinkled like wind chimes when he touched them. Behind a cluster of blue crystal trees, Jake found something that made his heart race. A small animal was trapped in a metal cage. The cage was old and rusty, probably left by illegal hunters who came to this world before the colony arrived. The creature inside looked like a lion cub, but it was bigger than any Earth cat. Even as a baby, it stood almost 4 feet tall. Jake stared in wonder. The animal had 6 legs instead of 4, and its fur was golden with silver stripes. Most amazing of all, its mane glowed with soft blue light that pulsed like a heartbeat. The creature's eyes were large and intelligent, filled with fear and pain. The cub's back leg was caught in the trap's metal teeth. Blood had dried around the wound, and Jake could see the animal had been fighting to get free for days. Its water bowl was empty, and it looked weak from hunger and thirst. Jake knew the rules. The colony handbook said never to touch unknown alien animals. They could be dangerous, could carry diseases. They could bite or scratch with poison. Claws. But looking at this small, suffering creature, Jake could not walk away. He set down his equipment and spoke softly. "Hey there, little one. I'm going to help you, okay?" The cub's glowing mane flickered brighter when it heard his voice. It made a sound like purring mixed with singing. Jake had never heard anything so beautiful and sad at the same time. Moving slowly, Jake examined the trap. It was an old spring-loaded. Design illegal on most worlds, but still used by poachers who did not care about animal welfare. The mechanism was jammed, which was why the cub could not escape. Jake pulled out his medical kit. As a xenobiologist, he always carried supplies for treating injured animals. He loaded a tranquilizer dart, designed for medium-sized creatures, and aimed carefully at the cub's shoulder. "This will help with the pain," he whispered. The dart hit its target, and within minutes, the cub's struggles became weaker. Its eyes stayed open, but looked peaceful instead of afraid. Jake worked quickly to pry open the trap's jaws. The metal was corroded, but finally gave way with a loud snap. The cub was free, but its leg was badly damaged. Jake could see broken bones through the torn skin. Without proper treatment, the animal would die from infection or be unable to hunt. For food, Jake made a decision that would change his life forever. He wrapped the cub in his emergency blanket and lifted it carefully. The animal was heavier than he expected, probably weighing as much as a large dog. Its glowing mane dimmed. 2 barely visible sparkles, and it made soft musical sounds that seemed to say thank you. The walk back to his research station took twice as long as usual. Jake had to stop several times to rest and check on his patient. The cub stayed calm, looking up at him with those large, intelligent eyes. Sometimes it would reach out with one paw to gently touch Jake's arm, as if making sure he was still there. Back at the station, Jake set up a clean area in his lab. He had equipment for treating Earth animals, but he hoped it would work on alien biology too. First, he gave the cub antibiotics and pain medicine. Then he carefully cleaned the wound and set the broken bones. The cub lay still during the treatment, watching Jake with what seemed like understanding. When Jake finished bandaging the leg, the creature made that musical purring sound again and touched his hand with its nose. Over the next few days, Jake took care of his unexpected patient. He fed it protein supplements mixed with water, since he did not know what the creature normally ate. The cub seemed to like the food and grew stronger each day. Its leg began to heal, and the glow in its mane became brighter. Jake learned that the animal was incredibly smart. It quickly figured out how to use the water dispenser by watching Jake. It learned to respond to its name when Jake started calling it Spark because of its glowing fur. Most amazing of all, it seemed to understand human emotions. When Jake felt sad or worried, Spark would make comforting musical sounds. When Jake was happy, the cub's mane would glow brighter and pulse faster. It was like the creature could read his feelings. During the quiet evenings, Jake would sit with Spark and talk about his day. The cub would listen carefully, tilting its head and making soft responses that sounded almost like conversation. Jake began to wonder if this species might be as intelligent as humans. Maybe even more so. On the 7th night, something changed. As Jake prepared Spark's evening meal, he heard sounds from outside the station. Deep, powerful calls echoed through the crystal forest. They sounded like Spark's musical voice, but much louder and more complex. Spark's head shot up, and its mane blazed with bright light. The cub called back, its voice full of excitement and joy. The answering calls came closer. Jake looked out the window and felt his blood turn cold. Massive shapes were moving between the crystal trees. Adult versions of Spark species, each one the size of a small truck. Their manes glowed like colorful fire in the darkness. One by one, 12 giant creatures emerged from the forest and surrounded Jake's research station. Their eyes reflected the station's lights like burning stars. Jake realized he was about to meet Spark's family, and he had no idea if they saw him as a friend or an enemy. Jake's hands shook as he watched the giant creatures circle his research station. Each one was massive, standing 8 feet tall, with glowing manes that shifted colors like the northern lights. Their 6 powerful legs moved without sound across the crystal grass. In the darkness, they looked like living stars that had come down from the sky. Spark pressed against Jake's leg, making excited musical sounds. The little cub's mane glowed brighter than Jake had ever seen it. Spark was not afraid of the big creatures. Instead, the cub seemed happy, like a child who had found its lost family. Jake knew he should be terrified. These alien predators could tear him apart in seconds. But something strange was happening. The giant creatures were not acting like hunters. They moved slowly and carefully, almost like they were trying not to scare him. The largest creature stepped forward. Its mane was gold and silver, flowing like liquid metal in the moonlight. This had to be the leader. Jake held his breath as the massive alien stopped just outside his station's door. Then something amazing happened. The creature sat down. It lowered its huge body to the ground and tilted its head to one side, just like Spark did when listening. The other 11 creatures did the same thing, creating a perfect circle around the station. The leader made a sound unlike anything Jake had ever heard. It was musical like Spark's voice, but deeper and more complex. The sound seemed to come from somewhere inside the creature's chest, mixing low notes with high ones in patterns that felt almost like words. Spark answered immediately, its small voice joining the bigger one. Jake listened in wonder as the 2 creatures seemed to have a conversation. Spark's mane pulsed in rhythm with its sounds, and Jake noticed the leader's mane was doing the same thing. After several minutes, the leader stood up again. It walked to Jake's equipment shed and did something that made Jake's jaw drop. The creature pulled out a device from somewhere in its thick mane. The device looked like a crystal that had been shaped by intelligent hands. The leader placed the crystal device on the ground and stepped back. Immediately, the crystal began to glow. Lights danced inside it, forming shapes that Jake recognized. They were star maps. 3-dimensional images of solar systems and planets floated above the crystal, like tiny holograms. Jake stared at the display. These creatures were not just intelligent animals. They had technology. They could make tools and machines just like humans could. The realization hit him like a punch to the stomach. He was not looking at alien pets or wild beasts. He was looking at an alien civilization. The leader touched its crystal device again, and the star map changed. Now it showed a single planet that Jake recognized. It was Kepler 442b, the world he was standing on right now. The image zoomed in to show the human colony on the southern continent. Jake's mouth went dry. These aliens knew about the human settlement. had been watching the colonists, probably since the day they arrived. The leader was showing him that they knew exactly who he was and where he came from. Spark walked over to the crystal device and touched it with one paw. The display changed again, this time showing images that made Jake gasp. He saw himself finding Spark in the trap. He saw himself carrying the injured cub back to the station, saw himself treating Spark's wounds and feeding the little creature. The aliens had been watching the whole time. They knew what Jake had done. The leader made more musical sounds, and this time Jake thought he could almost understand the meaning. The tones were grateful and warm, like someone saying thank you. The other creatures joined in, creating a chorus of alien voices that filled the night air with beautiful music. Jake felt tears in his eyes. He did not need to speak their language to understand what was happening. The aliens were thanking him for saving their child. Spark ran back to Jake and rubbed against his legs, purring with happiness. Then the little cub did something incredible. It looked up at Jake and made the same grateful sounds the adults were making. But mixed in with the alien music, Jake heard something else. Spark was trying to copy human words. "Jake," the cub said, in a voice like silver bells, "thank you, Jake." Jake knelt down and hugged Spark gently. "You're welcome, little friend." The leader watched this exchange with interest, its mane flickering through different colors. Then it did something that changed everything. The massive creature stood up and walked slowly toward Jake. It moved with careful steps, keeping its head low to show it meant no harm. When it reached Jake, the leader lowered its great head until it was level with Jake's face. Up close, Jake could see that the creature's eyes were not just intelligent. They were wise, like the eyes of someone who had lived for centuries and seen many worlds. The leader breathed softly on Jake's face. Its breath smelled like flowers and starlight. Then it pressed its forehead gently against Jake's forehead, and something amazing happened. Jake's mind filled with images and feelings that were not his own. He saw space through alien eyes, traveling between stars and ships that looked like they had been grown instead of built. He felt the joy these creatures experienced when exploring new worlds. He understood their love for their families and their respect for all living things. Most importantly, he felt their loneliness. These aliens had been traveling through space for thousands of years, looking for other intelligent species who could understand them. They had found many civilizations, but most were afraid or hostile. The creatures Jake was meeting belonged to something they called the Harmony Collective, a group of species who had learned to live together in peace. The vision ended, and Jake found himself staring into the leader's kind eyes. Without words, he understood what the creature was trying to tell him. Humans were the first species these aliens had met who showed natural kindness to strangers. Most other races only helped their own kind or acted nice when they wanted something in return. The leader stepped back and gestured toward the north with one of its powerful paws. The meaning was clear. It was inviting Jake to come with them, to see their home and learn about their civilization. Spark looked up at Jake with hopeful eyes, adding its own musical plea to the invitation. Jake looked around at the circle of alien creatures. Their manes glowed softly in the darkness, patient and waiting. In the distance, he could see the lights of the human colony. His people would be worried about him. They might even come looking for him with weapons. Thinking these creatures were dangerous, Jake had to make the most important choice of his life. Stay safe with his own species, or trust these aliens who had shown him more kindness than many humans ever had. He looked down at Spark, then up at the leader's wise eyes. "Okay," he said quietly. "I'll come with you." Jake packed his most important equipment into a small bag. He took his medical kit, his scanner, and a few protein bars. Everything else would have to stay behind. The alien leader, whom Jake had started thinking of as Aurora because of her beautiful golden mane, waited patiently outside his station. Spark danced around Jake's feet, excited to be going home. The little cub's leg had healed well during the past week. It could run and jump almost normally now, though Jake still worried about it getting hurt again. As they left the research station, Jake looked back one more time. He'd spent 3 months making this place his home. Now he was walking away to follow aliens into the unknown. Part of him wondered if he was making a terrible mistake, The journey north surprised Jake in every way. He had expected the aliens to travel on the surface, but Aurora led them to a hidden entrance between two crystal trees. The entrance looked like a natural cave. Jake could see that someone had carved smooth steps into the rock. They descended into tunnels that glowed with soft light. Jake realized the light was coming from the walls themselves. Tiny crystals grew from the tunnel ceiling like stars, creating enough light to see clearly. The air smelled clean and fresh, as if plants were growing somewhere nearby. Aurora walked beside Jake, matching her huge stride to his smaller steps. The other aliens spread out in front and behind, creating a protective circle around him. Spark ran ahead, then back to Jake, then ahead again, too excited to walk in a straight line as they traveled deeper underground. Jake saw that the tunnels were not natural caves. Someone had built them, carving smooth passages through the rock and growing crystal lights to mark the way. The craftsmanship was incredible, better than anything humans could build. "How long have your people been on this planet?" Jake asked Aurora. The alien leader turned her head toward him and made musical sounds. Jake could not understand the words, but somehow he got the feeling she was saying a very long time. Longer than humans had existed as a species. After 2 hours of walking, they reached something that made Jake stop and stare. The tunnel opened into a vast underground chamber filled with growing crystals. But these crystals were different from the ones in the forest above. They pulsed with colors that matched the aliens' manes, creating a light show that took Jake's breath away. In the center of the chamber sat dozens of alien young. They were bigger than Spark, but smaller than the adults, probably teenagers in alien years. When they saw the group approaching, they rushed forward with excited calls. The young aliens surrounded Jake, chattering in their musical language and reaching out to touch him gently with their paws. They had never seen a human before, and they were clearly fascinated. Jake stood still and let them examine him, smiling at their curiosity. One of the young aliens, braver than the rest, came very close to Jake's face and made soft questioning sounds. Jake held out his hand, palm up. The young alien sniffed his hand carefully, then touched it with the tip of its nose. "Hello, Jake," said quietly. "I'm Jake." The young alien tried to copy the word, its voice like wind chimes. "Jake," it said, then made happy purring sounds. Aurora called to the young aliens, and they reluctantly moved away from Jake. But they followed the group as Aurora led them to the far side of the chamber. There, another tunnel entrance waited, this one glowing with blue light instead of white. This tunnel sloped upward, and Jake could feel cold air flowing down from above. They were heading toward the surface again, but somewhere far north of where they had started. After another hour of walking, they emerged into daylight. Jake gasped at what he saw. They stood on a vast plain of ice and snow that stretched to the horizon. The cold air bit at his face, and he was glad he had brought his warm jacket. But the cold was not what amazed him. It was what sat in the middle of the ice plain. A ship waited there, but it was unlike any ship Jake had ever imagined. It was huge, easily, the size of a city block, but it did not look like it had been built by machines. Instead, it looked like it had grown from the ground, like a plant. The ship's hull was smooth and curved, made from the same crystal material as the tunnels. It glowed with soft light that pulsed like a heartbeat. Strange formations that might have been antennae or sensor arrays sprouted from its surface like branches on a tree. "This is impossible," Jake whispered. Aurora made amused sounds as if she understood his amazement. She led the group across the ice toward the ship. As they got closer, Jake could see that the ship was even more incredible than he had first thought. The surface was covered with patterns that reminded him of living cells or flower petals. Some parts of the hull were transparent, showing chambers. Inside, where more aliens moved around, other parts glowed brighter or dimmer as they watched, as if the ship was breathing. When they reached the ship, Aurora placed her paw on a smooth section of the hull. The crystal surface rippled like water, creating an opening just large enough for them to enter. Jake followed her inside, his heart pounding with excitement and fear. The inside of the ship was even stranger than the outside. The corridors curved and twisted like the inside of a seashell. The walls glowed with the same living light, and Jake could feel warmth radiating from them. It was like being inside a living creature rather than a machine. Aurora led him to a large chamber near the center of the ship. The room was circular with no visible controls or computers. Instead, the walls showed moving pictures of space, stars, and planets. Jake realized he was looking at some kind of navigation room. Other adult aliens were already in the chamber, waiting for them. They greeted Aurora with musical sounds and looked at Jake with curious but friendly eyes. Spark ran to join the other young aliens who were playing in one corner of the room. Aurora approached one of the walls and touched it with her paw. The pictures changed, showing Jake scenes that made his mind reel. He saw other worlds with different kinds of intelligent creatures. He saw ships like this one traveling between the stars. He saw vast cities that floated in space, connected by bridges of light. Then Aurora showed him something that changed everything Jake thought he knew about: the universe. The pictures showed dozens of different alien species standing together in what looked like a great council chamber. They were all different shapes and sizes, but they were clearly working together as friends and allies. Aurora turned to Jake and made a series of complex musical sounds. Though he could not understand the words, Jake got the feeling she was explaining something very important. She showed him more pictures of the different alien species and pointed to herself and her people. Slowly, Jake began to understand. These aliens were part of something much bigger than just one species. They belonged to a group that included many different kinds of intelligent life. A galactic community that had been working together for thousands of years, Aurora showed him. One more picture that made Jake's heart skip a beat. It showed a planet he recognized immediately. Earth, with its blue oceans and white clouds, hung in space like a jewel. The aliens knew about his homeworld. They'd been watching humanity. For a long time, Aurora made more musical sounds, and this time Jake was sure he understood the meaning. She was asking him a question. She wanted to know if humans would be interested in joining this galactic community. Jake looked around the amazing ship, the friendly alien faces watching him with hope in their eyes. He thought about Spark, who had trusted him completely. Despite being a different species, he thought about Aurora, who had shown him wonders beyond his wildest dreams. Then he thought about the human colony, where Administrator Coleman and his security forces were probably looking for him right now. They would be afraid when they found out about the aliens. They might even try to fight them. Jake realized he had become something he never expected to be. He was humanity's first ambassador to the stars. The weight of that responsibility settled on his shoulders as he looked into Aurora's wise eyes and tried to figure out how to answer her question. Jake returned to the human colony 3 days later, his mind full of amazing things he had seen. The alien ship had shown him wonders beyond imagination. He had watched star maps that covered the entire galaxy. He had met alien children who played games with balls of light. He'd eaten food that tasted like music and seen rooms that changed shape based on the emotions of the people inside them. Now he stood at the edge of the colony, looking at the familiar buildings that suddenly seemed small and primitive compared to the alien ship. He knew he had to tell his people what he had discovered, but he also knew they would not believe him. Jake walked through the colony gates, just as the morning shift was starting. Workers heading to the mining sites stopped and stared at him. He had been missing for 4 days. His clothes were dirty from traveling through the crystal caves, and he probably looked like someone who had been lost in the wilderness. Jake. Pete Williams ran toward him from the equipment shed. Pete was Jake's research assistant, a young man from Ohio who had volunteered for colony duty to pay for his college education. "Where have you been? Administrator Coleman has the whole security team looking for you." Before Jake could answer, alarms began ringing throughout the colony. The loudspeakers crackled to life with Administrator Coleman's voice. "All personnel, report to the main hall immediately. This is not a drill. Dr. Morrison has been found and needs immediate medical evaluation." Jake sighed. He had hoped to talk to a few people quietly before facing the colony's leadership. But Coleman was not the kind of man who did anything quietly in the main hall. Jake found himself facing the entire colony leadership. Administrator Rick Coleman sat at the head table, his red face showing anger and worry. Dr. Karen Bailey, the colony's chief scientist, looked at Jake with concern. Captain Roy Stevens, head of security, stood with his arms crossed and a frown on his face. "Sit down, Morrison," Coleman ordered. "Where the hell have you been?" Jake took a deep breath. "I found something incredible, sir. We're not alone on this planet. There's an intelligent alien species living here, and they want to make contact with us." The room went silent. Then Coleman started laughing, but it was not a happy sound. "Aliens," Coleman said. "You've been missing for 4 days, and you come back talking about aliens. Bailey, I want this man checked for head injuries immediately." "Doctor." Bailey stood up, her medical scanner already in her hand. "Jake, you look exhausted. Have you been eating? Drinking enough water? Sometimes stress and dehydration can cause hallucinations." "I'm not hallucinating," Jake said, standing up quickly. "I have proof. I've been to their ship. I've communicated with them. They have technology we can barely imagine, and they want to welcome us into a galactic community." Captain Stevens stepped forward. "Morrison, you're talking crazy. There are no aliens on this planet. Our surveys would have detected any intelligent life. They've been hiding from us," Jake explained. "They wanted to observe us first, to see what kind of people we are. I saved one of their young, and now they trust us." Coleman pounded his fist on the table. "Enough, Stevens. I want this man confined to medical until we can determine if he's suffered psychological damage. I want security teams to search the area where he was found. If there really are unknown life forms out there, we need to know about them." "Sir, please listen to me," Jake said desperately. "These beings are peaceful. They don't want to hurt us. But if you send armed teams into their territory, you might start a conflict that could destroy everything." "Guards." Coleman shouted too. Security officers moved toward Jake, but Pete Williams stepped between them. "Wait," Pete said. "Jake, tell us about this alien you supposedly saved. What did it look like?" Jake quickly described Spark, the glowing mane, the 6 legs, the musical voice. As he spoke, he saw doubt in some faces, but Pete and Susan Clark, the colony's chief engineer, were listening carefully. "That's impossible," Dr. Bailey said. "No creature that size could have a bioluminescent mane. The energy requirements alone would be..." She stopped talking as a familiar sound drifted through the colony's open windows. It was a musical call, beautiful and sad, echoing from the crystal forest nearby. "What was that?" Captain Stevens asked, his hand moving to his weapon. The sound came again, closer this time. Jake's heart sank as he recognized Spark's voice. The little alien was looking for him. "Nobody move," Jake said urgently. "That's the alien cub I told you about. It's just a baby and it's looking for me. If you scare it, the main hall's doors burst open and Spark bounded inside." The little alien looked around the room with curious eyes, its mane glowing bright blue with excitement. When it saw Jake, it made happy musical sounds and ran toward him. The colony meeting erupted in chaos. People screamed and jumped onto chairs. Captain Stevens drew his energy weapon and pointed it at Spark. "Nobody shoot," Jake yelled, throwing himself between the gun and the little alien. "It's just a baby." Stevens was already pulling the trigger. The energy blast hit Spark in the shoulder, spinning the small creature around. Spark cried out in pain, a sound like breaking glass that cut through Jake's heart. The wounded cub fell to the floor, its mane flickering weakly. Jake dropped to his knees beside Spark, checking the injury. The energy weapon had burned through fur and skin, leaving a painful but not deadly wound. "You idiots," Jake shouted at the security team. "It was just trying to find me," Spark whimpered, and pressed against Jake, seeking comfort. But something terrible was happening. The little alien's mane began pulsing with patterns Jake had never seen before. The light was getting brighter and brighter, almost too bright to look at. Jake remembered what Aurora had shown him about alien communication. The glowing manes were not just pretty lights. They were how these creatures talked to each other across long distances. Spark was calling for help. The response came within minutes. Deep, powerful voices echoed across the colony from the forest. Not just 1 or 2 voices, but dozens of them. The adult aliens were coming, and they sounded angry. Jake picked up Spark carefully, trying to comfort the injured cub. "It's okay. Little friend, you're going to be all right." But Jake knew that nothing was going to be all right. The colony's first contact with an alien species had just become a disaster. Coleman was shouting orders to his security teams. Captain Stevens was calling for backup from the mining sites. Dr. Bailey was trying to evacuate the medical center. Everyone was running around in panic, preparing for an alien attack that Jake knew would never come. These aliens did not attack with weapons or claws. They had something much more powerful and much more terrifying. Jake had felt it briefly when Aurora had touched minds with him. They could share emotions directly from one mind to another. The alien voices grew louder, and Jake felt something he had never experienced before. Wave after wave of grief and rage washed over him, emotions so strong they made him dizzy. All around the meeting hall, colonists were falling to their knees, overwhelmed by feelings that were not their own. The adult aliens were broadcasting their pain at seeing their child hurt. Every human in the colony was feeling the full force of alien anguish and anger. Jake was the only one still standing. His time with the aliens had taught him how to shield his mind from their emotional broadcasts. Looked around at the chaos and realized that he was the only person who could stop this disaster. But first, he had to convince two species who were terrified of each other to listen to reason. Outside, alien voices grew closer, and Jake knew he was running out of time. Jake carried the wounded Spark outside the colony gates as fast as he could. The little alien was getting heavier with each step, and its mane flickered weakly against his chest. Behind him, he could hear the colonists groaning and crying as alien emotions continued to wash over them in powerful waves. The adult aliens were close now. Jake could see their glowing manes through the crystal trees like moving stars. Their voices filled the air with sounds of grief and rage that made the ground vibrate under his feet. "Aurora!" Jake called out as loudly as he could. "Please stop. Spark is hurt but alive. Please don't hurt my people." The emotional storm paused for a moment, and Jake felt the aliens listening. Then Aurora stepped out of the forest, her golden mane blazing like fire. Her eyes were filled with pain and anger as she saw her injured child in Jake's arms. Aurora made harsh musical sounds that Jake had never heard before. Even without understanding the words, he knew she was demanding to know why humans had hurt an innocent cub. "It was an accident," Jake said, kneeling down and gently placing Spark on the grass between them. "My people were scared. They have never seen aliens before. They thought Spark was dangerous." Aurora approached her wounded child slowly, her mane shifting from angry red to worried blue. She examined Spark's injury with gentle touches, making soft, comforting sounds. The little cub responded weakly, pressing against its parent, more adult. Aliens emerged from the forest, forming a circle around Jake and Aurora. Their manes glowed with controlled anger, but Jake noticed they were not broadcasting their emotions as strongly as before. They were listening to him. "I know you're angry," Jake said, looking from one alien face to another. "I would be angry too if someone hurt my child. But this doesn't have to end in violence. We can fix this. We can make it right." Aurora lifted her head and stared at Jake with eyes that seemed to look straight into his soul. She made questioning sounds, and Jake understood she was asking what he proposed to do. Jake took a deep breath. "Let me bring some of my people here, not the scared ones or the angry ones, the good ones who will listen. We can have a ceremony like you showed me on your ship. We can teach each other." Behind him, Jake heard footsteps. He turned to see Pete, Williams and Susan Clark walking carefully toward them, their hands raised to show they were not armed. Both looked pale and shaken from the emotional storm, but they were coming anyway. "Jake," Pete called softly, "are you okay? Is the little one going to be all right?" Aurora's mane flickered with surprise. These humans were approaching despite their fear. She made curious sounds, watching Pete and Susan with interest. "These are my friends," Jake told Aurora. "They want to help." Susan knelt down near Spark, being careful not to get too close. "I'm an engineer," she said to Aurora, though she knew the alien could not understand her words. I fix things that are broken. Maybe I can help fix your baby. Jake translated Susan's words into the simple gestures and emotions he had learned from the aliens. Aurora listened carefully, then made a decision that surprised everyone. She picked up Spark gently and carried the cub closer to Susan. For the next hour, Susan worked with her engineering tools while Jake helped translate between human and alien medicine. Pete assisted by holding equipment and asking careful questions. Aurora watched every move they made, was ready to protect her child if necessary. Other aliens began approaching slowly, drawn by curiosity about the humans who were helping instead of fighting. More colonists also came, led by Dr. Bailey, who had finally overcome her fear enough to offer medical assistance. This is incredible, Dr. Bailey whispered as she watched Susan clean and bandage Spark's wound using both human and alien techniques. Their biology is similar enough to ours that our medicines work, but different enough to be fascinating. As the sun set, a small group of humans and aliens sat together in the crystal grass. Spark was feeling much better, playing with alien and human children who had gathered to watch the strange cooperation. The adults from both species watched each other carefully. Learning, Aurora activated her crystal device again, showing the star maps to Dr. Bailey and the other humans. The scientists gasped as they saw the scope of the galactic community the aliens belonged to. Dozens of worlds, hundreds of species, all working together in peace. "How long have you been waiting for us?" Dr. Bailey asked Aurora. Aurora made musical sounds and showed images on her device. Jake translated as best he could. "She says they have been watching Earth for over 100 years. They wanted to make contact, but they needed to know if humans could be trusted, and now they know." Pete asked. Aurora looked at Jake, then at Susan, who was still fussing over Spark's bandages. Then at Dr. Bailey, who was carefully studying alien star charts. She made warm, approving sounds. Jake felt tears in his eyes as he understood her meaning. "She says humans are the first species they have met who show kindness to strangers without being asked. Most species only help their own kind." Aurora stood up and made a formal announcement to both groups. Her mane glowed with ceremonial patterns as she spoke. When she finished, she looked expectantly at Jake. "She wants to make this official," Jake said to the humans. "She wants to invite humanity to join the Harmony Collective as the newest member species." Administrator Coleman chose that moment to arrive with the security team. He had recovered from the emotional storm and was looking for a fight. "Morrison, step away from those creatures immediately." But something had changed in the past few hours. Pete, Susan, and Dr. Bailey stood up and moved between Coleman and the aliens. Other colonists who had been watching the peaceful contact also stepped forward. "No, sir," Dr. Bailey said firmly. "These beings are not creatures. They're people, and they are offering us the greatest opportunity in human history." Coleman looked around at the mixed group of humans and aliens, Spark playing happily with human children, at Aurora's patient expression as she waited for an answer. "This is insane," Coleman muttered, but his voice lacked conviction. Jake stood up and walked to the center of the circle. "Aurora's asking me to speak for humanity," he said to the assembled colonists. "She wants to know if we are ready to join a galactic community based on cooperation instead of conquest." He looked around. At both groups, human and alien, young and old, fearful and hopeful. "I can't make that decision for all of humanity," Jake said, "but I can make it for myself." He turned to Aurora and spoke clearly. "Yes, I accept your invitation." Aurora's mane blazed with joy, and the other aliens joined her in a chorus of musical celebration. The sound was so beautiful that even Coleman stopped frowning and listened. Pete was the next to step forward. "I accept too." Then Susan. "Me too." Dr. Bailey nodded. "Yes." Out. One by one, more colonists stepped forward to accept Aurora's invitation. Not all of them, but enough to show that humanity was ready to take its first steps into a larger universe. As the stars came out overhead, Jake sat with Spark sleeping in his lap and Aurora resting beside him. Tomorrow, there would be much work to do. The colony would need to be transformed into a diplomatic outpost. Earth would need to be contacted and convinced. The Harmony Collective would need to prepare for humanity's integration. But tonight, Jake just enjoyed the moment when two Species had chosen trust over fear, and the galaxy had become a little less lonely.